I was just talking about honesty, Austin, and we have been taught so many, and I'm gonna speak in the way my great grandmother would be proud of me, and say we have been told so many untruths. Because she would never use the word lie. Untruths. We've been told so many, Austin, and some of the untruth that we were told and taught, Austin, some of the people, you can't blame them because they believe it was the truth too.
Right, that's exactly right. And unfortunately, the untruth, as you call it, just perpetuates itself into reality for a lot of people. And then for others who dig and search for the truth, we get a little bit enlightened, and it's hard for people to digest it, DJ Roy, the people who don't know. It's so hard to listen, to hear something that is so different from what you believe. It's so hard.
Right.
Believe me, it's hard for me too. It's difficult for me.
Wow. As we expose and uncover some of the things that have been hidden, and even some of the things that are right in front of our eyes, Austin, what has been the response? Because I know my phone rings. What has been the response for you?
The response has been universally is extraordinary. And you know what makes me feel encouraged, DJ Roy, is when I talk to people who are in their 70s and their 80s and their 90s and they're Christians, and they accept that they will go back, and some of them have and done the research, and then some of them would get back to me and said, oh my God. And the second thing is that when I talk to pastors, ministers, bishops, ordained people of the cloth, as my father would say, my father himself was a minister, a lot of them are shocked when they went back and do the research themselves. They could not believe that they did not scratch the surface. They were just skimming on top of the surface, not realizing that beneath the surface there's just so much knowledge, so much unknown. And I think a lot of us just believe what we hear and don't think beyond to question whether it's true or not. Right. And that's true for other, but for other things as well. A lot of us are that way because we don't have the time, DJ Ray, to dig for the truth.
What are we going to touch on this morning, Austin? I missed last week. I truant a little, was out of Monday school, but I'm here today. I'm ready, willing, and able. Where do we start?
So a lot of these older people have asked me to recap a little bit so they get a good foundation.
Okay.
Because they're doing research and they have gaps in their research. Whether they're doing research in the Bible or just history in general. And then, there are other people who are ministers and pastors. A lot of these people are, even regular people are talking to their ministers and pastors and bishops about this teacher. So I think there's something taking place out there that is a good thing. And there are people who want to get a little bit of foundation. So what I want to do today, DJ Roy, is to go back to what I think, based on all the research I've done, all the knowledge I have, all the understanding I have. I want to go back and say, in the beginning, what was and what caused us, people who are of African ancestry, and Africans themselves. We should just call it out. This is the year of calling it out, plain and simple. Just call it out.
Call it out.
Bob Marley said the truth is in the fence. So let the chips fall where they may. So what I want to say, DJ, I want to go back to the beginning. And in the beginning, what happened is that, DJ Roy, the Africans of Kush and the Africans of Southern Africa and the Africans of West Africa and the Africans particularly of Mali, they had a lot of inventions at least 10,000 years before the Bible, and that's very critical to know, because during that time there was no Kush and there was no Egypt, there was none, there was no Ethiopia, there was no Nubia, and there was just the land of Al-Kibalan, or the land of Tanetaru, which is Africans, the Medineta, that's what it's called. Bible now, and I call them. I can go back as far as Taseti. So the Kushites, the early Kushites, they invented mathematics, the royal cubit, or the metric system that a particular country has taken credit for, which is not true. And they invented pi, which is part of geometry, the golden ratio, which is part of geometry, and a whole lot more different mathematics they invented. And then they used that, DJ, to invent engineering, and thus they built the pyramids and temples from cement, not just from stone, but from cement that they made. They invented the cement from natron and limestone, and they used, which is chemistry people, and that's how they, that's how they're able to build over 500 pyramids between Egypt and Nubia. Over 500 pyramids they built there alone, way back. and then this technology, DJ Roy, the chemistry of building materials, was first invented in Mali about 5,000 years before the Tassetians, which is about 8,000 years before the Bible. And if you want to count people, it's about 9,000 years before Christ. So the Kushites invented astronomy and Naphtopleia, and the Kushites used that knowledge in physics to map the zodiac, the constellations of Orion, the Ursa Majoris over the North Pole, the Canis Major, where the Sirius star lives, the Milky Way over the South Pole. They mapped all of that. Yes, the Kushites successfully, DJ Roy, united the divine forces of the heavens and earth with God. They did, people. And they harnessed the spiritual force of God in their temples. People, if you think the people who worship today in those major religions, or they believe in God, multiply that by 10 with the Kushites. That's how deeply, profoundly they believe in God, that everything they did was for God. The temple was for God. The pyramids were for God. Everything they did was for God. So this is what sacred divine spirituality actually is, people. So you know now that we don't practice divine spirituality on earth today. It's been destroyed, and I'm going to tell you about that. So the Africans of Kush were the most powerful people on planet Earth during that time, DJ Roy. And God gave them everything: knowledge, wisdom, understanding. Yes, God gave it to them. Then others across the seas and oceans wanted it all. They wanted it all. They saw isn't it funny, DJ, that the Bible was written over 1,500 years, at least 1,500 years after the pyramids in Africa were built. Isn't it funny that even those prophets who visited Egypt never mentioned the pyramid?
Wow.
And it's never mentioned in the Bible. Those pyramids and temples were never mentioned. Isn't that funny, people? You all should think about that. But yes, they came from across the seas and oceans, and there were 5 to 6 massive invasions, just bloody. And they were bloody because the Africans, Detroit, didn't expect that.
Right.
They weren't prepared for that. They didn't believe that people could be so evil. And the invasions took place up to 600 AD. And then after 600 AD, the massive exploitations took place in Africa that led to mass genocides and slavery, right, people? And yes, the Africans in Africa are responsible for that too. They sold a lot of people into slavery. So they're responsible too. So I'm not just blaming the massive invaders, I'm also blaming the Africans who made that happen, contributed to that, facilitated it. They made it happen. So the bottom line is that, Detroit, the Bible permitted all of what I just said.
Okay.
From the Kushites, the Kushites, to up to this day, the Bible permits and sanctions all those massive genocides, mass murder of women and children. To this day, the Bible sanctions it. And I'm going to tell you, people, where it is in the Bible and why they need to rewrite the Bible. The people who wrote it, they need to rewrite it, because what's happening today in the world with racism and discrimination and hate, it still happens to this day, because the Bible, I believe the Bible is the source of that sanction, where people believe they can commit mass murder and still go to heaven. Where have you ever heard that?